The grand Whitmore mansion on Fifth Avenue stood like a fortress of propriety against the December sky. Inside, Evelyn Whitmore pressed her palm against the frosted window, watching carriages clatter through the snow-dusted streets below. Her breath fogged the glass as she counted the days until her wedding. 14 sunrises until she would become Mrs. Theodore Blackwood. Stand straight. Evelyn, a lady doesn't slouch. Her mother's voice cut through the drawing room like a shard of ice. Evelyn straightened her spine, smoothing the emerald silk of her afternoon dress. At 23, she had mastered the art of appearing serene while her thoughts churned like storm clouds. Theodore will call this evening to discuss the wedding arrangements. Mrs. Whitmore continued, her needlework never pausing. You will be gracious and agreeable. Yes, Mother. The words tasted like ash. Theodore Blackwood, Senator Blackwood, as he preferred to be addressed, was 42 years old with cold gray eyes and hands that lingered too long on her waist during their formal dances. Her father had arranged the match 6 months ago, sealed with brandy and cigars in his study while Evelyn sat upstairs. Her fate decided without her presence. That evening, as predicted, Theodore arrived in his finest black coat, bringing the smell of tobacco and pomade into their parlor. Evelyn endured his kiss on her gloved hand, his possessive grip on her elbow as he guided her to the settee. My dear Evelyn, he said, settling beside her with proprietary ease. You grow more beautiful each day. I trust you're preparing for your new duties as a senator's wife. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Theodore, please, we'll be married soon enough. The conversation droned on. Talk of his political ambitions, the grand house he'd purchased in Washington, the entertaining she would oversee. Evelyn nodded at appropriate intervals while her mind wandered to the novels hidden beneath her bed. Stories of adventure and freedom in territories beyond civilization's reach. After Theodore departed, Evelyn claimed a headache and retired early. In her room, she locked the door and retrieved a letter hidden in her jewelry box, a letter that had arrived that morning, delivered by her lady's maid, Sarah, who had always been more friend than servant. The paper trembled in her hands as she read again what Sarah had discovered. Theodore Blackwood was nearly bankrupt, his debts mounting from failed speculation in railroad stocks. The marriage settlement, her dowry of $50,000, would save him from ruin. But more damning still were the whispers Sarah had gathered from other servants. Theodore's first wife hadn't died of pneumonia as claimed. The servants spoke of bruises hidden beneath high collars, of laudanum prescribed for nerves, of a young woman who grew paler and quieter until she simply stopped. Evelyn's hands shook as she fed the letter to the flames in her fireplace. She couldn't confront her father. He would dismiss it as servants' gossip, and the wedding would proceed. Her mother would speak of duty and sacrifice. There was no ally in this house of marble and mahogany. She moved to her wardrobe, pushing aside gowns of silk and satin until she found what she sought, a plain brown dress she'd convinced Sarah to procure from a second-hand shop, along with a worn carpet bag. For weeks, she'd been preparing, secreting away small valuables that wouldn't be immediately missed. A pearl necklace here, a gold bracelet there, items that could be sold without attracting attention. The next 3 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Evelyn smiled through fittings for her wedding gown, nodded through discussions of flowers and music, all while her escape plan crystallized. She would leave on Thursday night, when her parents attended the Astors' Christmas ball. Sarah would tell them she had retired with a headache. By the time they discovered her absence, she would be on a train heading west. Thursday arrived with a blizzard that seemed heaven-sent. Her parents debated canceling their evening plans, but social obligation won. Evelyn pleaded a headache, not entirely feigned, as her nerves were strung tight as piano wire. Rest well, my dear, her mother said, briefly touching her forehead. You look peaked. We can't have you ill for the wedding. The moment their carriage disappeared into the swirling snow, Evelyn transformed. Off came the rose silk evening gown, replaced by the plain brown dress and sturdy boots. She pinned her golden hair severely back, covered it with a modest bonnet. In the mirror, a servant girl stared back, unremarkable, forgettable. Sarah helped her with trembling hands. "Miss Evelyn, are you certain? The weather is terrible, and traveling alone—" "I have no choice." Evelyn pressed a small purse into Sarah's hands, payment for her years of loyalty and friendship. "If they question you, say I was asleep when you last checked. You know nothing more." The carpetbag held her few possessions, the plain clothing, her small hoard of jewelry wrapped in handkerchiefs, $40 in bills, and a train ticket purchased under the name Mary Smith, bound for Chicago, with connections continuing west. The streets were nearly empty, the blizzard keeping sensible people indoors. Evelyn struggled through deepening snow to Grand Central Depot, her fine leather boots already soaked through. At the station, she hunched her shoulders and affected a slight Irish accent when purchasing additional tickets, anything to distance herself from the refined Miss Whitmore. The train was delayed 2 hours by the storm. Evelyn huddled in the third-class waiting room, her heart jumping every time a door opened, but no one looked twice at a plainly dressed young woman traveling alone, likely a domestic servant heading home for Christmas. When finally she boarded, settling onto a hard wooden bench in the third-class car, Evelyn allowed herself one moment of grief for the life she was leaving, not the gilt cage of society, but the few genuine attachments. Sarah, her younger brother James away at Harvard, the library where she'd spent countless peaceful hours. The train lurched into motion, carrying her away from everything she'd known. She had told the ticket agent she was bound for San Francisco to work for a cousin, but in truth, she had no clear destination. Only away, far away, where the Whitmore name meant nothing and she could disappear into the vast American wilderness. For 3 days, she traveled in increasing discomfort. The third-class car was crowded with immigrants and laborers, the air thick with tobacco smoke and unwashed bodies. She ate sparingly from the food vendors at station stops, hoarding her dwindling funds. In Chicago, she sold a pearl necklace for far less than its worth, but enough to continue westward. It was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, that her luck ran out. She had found cheap lodging near the rail yard, planning to catch the Union Pacific line the next morning. The boarding house was rough, but seemed safe enough, until the owner, a gap-toothed man named Josiah Crane, recognized quality despite her plain dress. "You're no serving girl," he said, blocking her path to the stairs. "Hands too soft, way you walk too refined. Running from something, ain't you?" Evelyn tried to push past, but he grabbed her carpetbag. In the struggle, it burst open, spilling her remaining jewelry across the dirty floor. Crane's eyes lit with greed. Well, looks like Christmas came early." She fled with only the clothes on her back and $8 sewn into her corset, emergency funds she'd hidden even from herself. Behind her, Crane's laughter echoed through the squalid halls. Now, truly desperate, she used her last money for a place on a freight wagon heading into Wyoming territory. The driver, a taciturn man who reeked of whiskey, promised to take her to the nearest town. Instead, he left her at a crossroads in the middle of nowhere once she rebuffed his advances, throwing her into the dirt before driving away with a curse. Evelyn picked herself up, shaking with cold and fear. The landscape stretched endlessly, rolling hills covered in snow, distant mountains like jagged teeth against the gray sky. The wind cut through her thin dress like knives. She had no food, no money, no idea which direction led to civilization. She walked because standing still meant death. The snow began falling again as darkness approached, thick flakes that obscured what little trail she'd been following. Her feet went numb in the ruined boots. Ice crystals formed on her eyelashes. This was how she would die, not in a warm bed surrounded by family, but alone in a wilderness that didn't know or care about the Whitmore fortune or Theodore Blackwood's cruel hands. There was almost relief in it, when she could walk no more. She collapsed beneath a cluster of pine trees that offered meager shelter. The snow continued to fall, beginning to cover her still form. Her last coherent thought was a prayer, not for rescue, but for James to forgive her for leaving without goodbye. She didn't hear the hoofbeats approaching through the storm, didn't see the rider who dismounted and knelt beside her still form. Strong hands checked for a pulse at her throat, then lifted her as easily as a child. Luke Harlan had been tracking a wounded elk when he found her. 10 years of living alone in the mountains had honed his instincts for danger, but the half-frozen young woman posed no threat. She weighed next to nothing as he settled her across his saddle, wrapping his thick buffalo coat around her before mounting behind her. The ride to his cabin took an hour through the worsening storm. He held her against his chest, sharing what warmth he could, occasionally checking that she still breathed. Once or twice she stirred, murmuring words he couldn't understand. His cabin sat in a sheltered valley, built with his own hands from local timber. It wasn't much. One room with a stone fireplace, a rough table and chair, a bed covered in furs, but it was warm and dry and far from prying eyes, which was all Luke had wanted when he'd retreated here 3 years ago. He carried the woman inside, laying her on the bed before building up the fire. In the flickering light, he could see she was young, perhaps early 20s, with fine features beneath the dirt and exhaustion. Her dress, though plain, was well made. Her hands, as he chafed them between his own to restore circulation, were soft, city hands that had never known hard labor. A runaway, most likely. Luke had seen enough of them to recognize the signs, some fleeing bad marriages, others escaping worse situations. He didn't judge. Everyone had their reasons for running. He worked through the night to save her, warming stones by the fire to tuck around her, spooning hot broth between her blue lips when she stirred enough to swallow. The fever came near dawn, her body's protest against its ordeal. He bathed her burning face with cool water, mixed willow bark tea for when she could drink. For 2 days she drifted between sleep and delirium, speaking fragments that painted a picture he didn't want to see. Something about a wedding, about being trapped, about someone named Theodore who made her voice tight with fear even in unconsciousness. On the 3rd morning, her eyes opened clear and focused, finding him sitting in the chair by the fire, mending a bridle. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, she taking in his weathered face and work-worn clothes. He watching wariness replace confusion in her gaze. "You're safe," he said simply. "Storm's past. You can leave when you're strong enough." She tried to sit up, winced, lay back down. "Where?" "My cabin. Found you near Frozen by Beaver Creek. That was 3 days ago." Her hand went to her throat, checking for something. Jewelry, maybe, long since stolen. Thank you." He shrugged, returning to his work. "Coffee's hot if you can manage it. There's stew when you're ready for food." She watched him work, this stranger who had saved her life without question or demand. Outside, she could hear the wind singing through the pines, see snow falling past the single window. For the first time since reading Sarah's letter, Evelyn felt something that might have been peace. She was nobody here. She was safe, for now. The first week passed in careful silence. Luke Harlan had grown accustomed to quiet in his 3 years of solitude. But this was different. A silence filled with unasked questions and cautious observation. The woman, who'd given her name simply as Mary, moved about the cabin like a ghost learning to be solid again. She insisted on helping despite her weakness, fumbling with simple tasks that clearly puzzled her. The first time she tried to build up the fire, she nearly smothered it with too much wood. When she attempted to make coffee, she stared at the pot as if it might reveal its secrets through concentration alone. "Never made coffee over a fire before," she admitted, color rising in her pale cheeks. "City bred," Luke observed, taking the pot from her hands. "Here, watch." He showed her how to measure the grounds, how to judge when the water was ready, how to let it settle before pouring. She watched with intense focus, as if memorizing a crucial lesson. When she took her first sip of the properly made brew, her eyes closed in genuine pleasure. That's very good. Just coffee," he said. But something in her appreciation made the simple act feel significant. Days developed a rhythm. Luke would rise before dawn to tend his horses and check his trap lines. When he returned, she would have coffee ready, improving each day, and a simple breakfast of biscuits and preserved meat. She learned to keep the fire banked, to melt snow for water, to sweep the plank floor with the crude broom he'd fashioned from pine boughs. "You don't have to do all this," he told her one morning, finding her struggling to haul water from the stream that ran behind the cabin. "I need to be useful," she said, setting down the bucket to rest. "I can't. I won't be a burden." There was desperation in her voice that he recognized, the need to prove one's worth, to earn one's keep. He'd felt it himself once, before he'd learned that the mountains didn't care about a man's past usefulness, only his present survival. "You're not a burden," he said simply, taking the bucket from her. "But use the pulley next time. No sense wearing yourself out." He showed her the simple rope and pulley system he'd rigged to make water hauling easier. Watched as understanding dawned on her face. She was quick. He'd give her that. Whatever life she'd led before hadn't prepared her for physical labor, but she had a sharp mind that grasped concepts readily. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, him working on leather or maintaining his weapons, her mending clothes with clumsy but determined stitches. Sometimes he'd tell her things, the names of the peaks visible from his door, which plants could be eaten and which would kill, how to read weather in the way clouds gathered over the mountains. She drank in the information like someone dying of thirst. Occasionally, she'd ask questions that revealed more than she probably intended, wondering if the railroad passed near here, how far the nearest town was, whether many travelers came through these parts. Not many. He answered that last one. Chose this spot for the solitude. She nodded, understanding passing between them without words. They were both hiding from something. The difference was, he'd made peace with his exile. One night, a blizzard howled outside with enough force to make the cabin walls creak. The temperature plummeted until even the roaring fire couldn't quite chase away the cold. Luke added extra wood, then glanced at Mary huddled in the corner on the pile of furs he'd given her for a bed. "You'll freeze over there," he said gruffly. "Better share warmth tonight, or we'll both wake up ice blocks." Her eyes widened, and he saw fear flash across her face before she controlled it. "I'm fine. Wasn't improper suggestion." He cut her off. "Just survival. I'll keep to my side." She hesitated, then nodded. They arranged themselves carefully on his bed, backs to each other, the thick layer of furs between them. But as the night deepened and the cold intensified, proximity became necessity. He woke once to find her pressed against his back, shivering despite the shared warmth. Without comment, he adjusted the furs around them both and let her be. Morning brought awkwardness. She pulled away as soon as consciousness returned. Mumbling apologies, he waved off. But something had shifted. The careful distance they'd maintained had been breached by simple human need. That day, while Luke was out checking his traps, Evelyn, for she thought of herself by her true name in private moments, explored the cabin more thoroughly. She'd recovered enough strength to be restless, and curiosity had always been her weakness. The cabin was sparse but organized. Everything had its place: tools on wall pegs, supplies in wooden crates, clothing in a rough-hewn chest. On a high shelf, she found something unexpected: books, just 3 of them, well-worn, a Bible, a volume of Shakespeare, and a treatise on animal husbandry. She was leafing through Hamlet when Luke returned, stamping snow from his boots. "You read," she said, not quite a question. "Man's got to do something when the snow's too deep to travel." He hung his coat on its peg, not meeting her eyes. "You're welcome to them." That evening, she read aloud by the fire, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence when he didn't object. Her voice, cultured despite her attempts to roughen it, brought Ophelia's madness to life in the small cabin. When she glanced up, she found Luke watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You read well," he said when she paused. "My gov—" She caught herself. "I had good teachers." He nodded, accepting the near slip without comment, but she saw the knowledge in his eyes. He knew she was quality trying to hide his common. The question was whether he'd do anything about it. Days passed. The snow continued intermittently. sealing them in their small world. Evelyn learned to cook simple meals, to bank a fire properly, to predict weather by the feel of the wind. Her hands roughened. Her pale skin took on color. When she caught her reflection in the water bucket, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Luke, for his part, found himself talking more than he had in years. Nothing too personal. He kept his past locked away like she did hers, but observations about the land, stories of animals he'd encountered, practical knowledge she absorbed eagerly. Saw a painter cat up on the ridge. He mentioned one evening. Big male, probably 8 feet nose to tail. Painter cat. She looked up from the shirt she was mending, one of his torn on a branch. Mountain lion, cougar, they go by different names. He continued oiling his rifle. A necessary task in the damp winter air. They're mostly shy of humans, but a hungry one in winter might get bold. She shivered, and not from cold. What do you do if you meet one? Don't run. That triggers their chase instinct. Make yourself big. Make noise. Back away slow. If it comes at you, he patted the rifle. That's why I keep this handy. Have you ever had to shoot one? Once. His hand stilled on the gun. Rather not have beautiful creatures, but it was her or me, and I chose me. There was something in his voice. Regret, maybe, or understanding. This man who lived so far from civilization still respected the wild things that shared his mountains. It was unexpected, this gentleness in someone so obviously capable of violence. Tell me about the horses, she said, changing the subject. She'd seen them in the lean-to stable attached to the cabin, 3 sturdy mountain horses that Luke cared for with quiet affection. A half-smile crossed his weathered face. Buck's the bay, steady as a rock. Not pretty, but he'll carry you through hell without complaint. Storm's the gray mare, smart as a whip and knows it. Then there's Fool. Fool? Black gelding. Named him that because he was fool enough to trust me when I found him half dead from wolf wounds. Nursed him back, and now he won't leave. You saved him, she said softly. Like you saved me. Luke shifted uncomfortably. Just did what anyone would. No, she said with quiet certainty. They wouldn't. Their eyes met across the fire-lit space. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. Both had known the kind of people who wouldn't stop to help a stranger, who would see weakness as opportunity. That night, sleep wouldn't come for Evelyn. She lay on her pile of furs, listening to Luke's steady breathing across the room, and let herself think about the future for the first time since fleeing New York. She couldn't stay here forever. Spring would come, the snow would melt, and questions would arise that neither one had answered. But for now, in the depths of winter with snow sealing out the world, she was safe. More than safe. She was learning to be strong. A sound made her tense, Luke shifting, muttering in his sleep. She'd heard him do this before, caught fragments of words that hinted at nightmares. Tonight was different. Tonight, the words were clear. Didn't know. Swear I didn't know. Jenny, I'm sorry, he thrashed, caught in whatever memory plagued him. Without thinking, Evelyn rose and crossed to him, laying a gentle hand on his shoulder. Luke, wake up. It's all right. His eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. For a moment, he didn't seem to see her. Then recognition dawned, followed quickly by shame. Sorry, he muttered, sitting up and running a hand through his dark hair. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I couldn't sleep. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. Do you want to talk about it? No. The refusal was sharp, automatic, but then softer. Just old ghosts. Man lives alone too long. They get loud. I understand, she said. And she did. Her own ghosts were quieter but no less persistent. Theodore's possessive smile, her mother's cold disappointment, her father's casual disposal of her future. That name, she ventured carefully. Jenny, was she? My sister. The words came out cracked, broken. She was 12 when she died. Because of me. Evelyn waited. Not pushing. Sometimes the best comfort was simply presence. I was a lawman once. Luke continued, staring at his hands. Deputy sheriff in Colorado. Good at it, too. Maybe too good. I tracked a man named Calvin Morse for 3 months, murdered a shopkeeper during a robbery. Finally caught him, brought him in. He hanged for it. He paused, lost in memory. Year later, dying man confessed to that killing. Morse was innocent, but by then, his brother had already taken revenge. Came to my house while I was out. Jenny was there alone, doing her sewing. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Evelyn felt tears on her cheeks, for him, for the child lost, for all the ways life could shatter what we held dear. The town turned on me, Luke said flatly. Said I was careless, too eager for conviction. Maybe they were right. The brother was never caught. I left the badge on my desk and rode out. Been here since. It wasn't your fault, Evelyn whispered. You did your job with what you knew. Doesn't matter. He looked at her then, and she saw the weight he carried. Jenny's still dead. Morse, too. Can't undo any of it. She understood then why he lived here, in this isolation. It wasn't just hiding. It was penance, a self-imposed exile for a sin that might not have been his, but which he'd claimed nonetheless. Without conscious thought, she took his hand. It was calloused, rough, twice the size of hers, but it trembled slightly in her grasp. We all carry our dead, she said softly, but they wouldn't want us to bury ourselves with them. He looked at their joined hands as if puzzled by the sight. How do you know what they'd want? Because the people who love us want us to live, even when they can't anymore. Something shifted in his dark eyes, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. You should sleep, he said. Storm's supposed to break tomorrow. I'll need to check the trap lines. She rose, understanding the dismissal but not offended by it. Some walls came down brick by brick, not all at once, back on her makeshift bed. She pulled the furs around her and listened to the wind dying outside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, for both of them. But tonight, they'd shared their darkness and found it a little less consuming. Just before sleep claimed her, she heard Luke's voice, so quiet she might have imagined it. Thank you, Mary. She smiled into the darkness. Mary, the name that wasn't hers but had become a shelter of its own. When spring came and truth became necessary, would he understand why she'd lied? Would he forgive her as she'd asked him to forgive himself? Time would tell. For now, the fire crackled low. The storm gentled into silence, and 2 damaged souls found peace in proximity. The mountains kept their secrets, and so did they. The storm broke as Luke had predicted, leaving behind a world transformed by pristine snow and crystalline air. Evelyn, still clinging to Mary as her shield, stood in the doorway, breathing in the sharp mountain morning. 3 weeks had passed since Luke found her, and she could barely recognize the woman she'd been. Want to learn something useful today? Luke emerged from the stable, Buck's reins in his hand. She turned, surprised. He'd been teaching her survival skills daily, but always within sight of the cabin. What did you have in mind? Tracking, hunting, skills you'll need if... He paused. Skills worth knowing. If you stay, if you leave, if I'm not here. The unfinished sentence hung between them, full of possibilities neither was ready to voice. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He'd already laid out warm clothes, his extras, modified roughly to fit her smaller frame. She dressed quickly, tucking her hair under a worn hat, wrapping herself in layers that smelled of wood smoke and pine. Luke helped her mount Storm, the gray mare who'd taken a surprising liking to her. His hands at her waist were impersonal, steady, but she felt their warmth through all the layers. They rode in companionable silence through forests heavy with snow. Luke pointed out signs she would have missed, rabbit tracks crossing their path, marks where deer had scraped bark from trees, the distinctive pattern of elk droppings. Everything tells a story, he said, dismounting to examine a set of prints. This elk passed maybe 2 hours ago. See how the edges are still sharp? Snow hasn't had time to soften them. She slid from Storm's back to crouch beside him, following his pointing finger. It looks big. Bull elk. Probably 700 pounds. Moving slow. See the drag marks? He's conserving energy. Luke stood, scanning the tree line. Winter's hard on them. They yard up where they can find food. Try to wait out the worst of it. Like us, she thought, but didn't say. They continued deeper into the wilderness. Luke teaching as they went. How to move quietly through snow. Where to step to avoid hidden obstacles. How to use wind direction to mask human scent. Evelyn absorbed it all, understanding that these lessons were more than practical. They were Luke's way of caring, ensuring she could survive without him. At midday, they stopped at an overlook that stole her breath. The valley spread below them like a painting, mountains rising in every direction, their peaks touching clouds that promised more snow. It's magnificent, she whispered. Luke dismounted and helped her down, his expression softer than usual. First time I saw this view, I knew I'd found home. He unpacked simple food from his saddlebags, dried meat, hard biscuits, water that stayed liquid only because he'd kept it close to his body. Most folks see emptiness up here. I see peace. They ate in silence, shoulders almost touching as they sat on a fallen log. Evelyn felt the vastness of the landscape seep into her bones, so different from New York's crowded streets and suffocating drawing rooms. Out here, she could breathe. Out here, she was no one and everyone all at once. I understand why you stay, she said quietly. Do you? He glanced at her, those dark eyes holding questions he wouldn't ask. It's honest here, clean. The mountains don't lie or pretend or... She caught herself before saying, force you into marriages that are really business transactions. Or judge what you've done. Luke finished. They just are. A comfortable quiet settled between them. Then Luke pointed to a distant ridge. Want to see something special? They rode another hour, climbing switchback trails that made Evelyn grateful for Storm's steady temperament. Finally, Luke signaled a stop near a cluster of pines. Quiet now, he murmured, helping her dismount. Leave the horses here. They crept forward on foot, Luke's hand occasionally touching her elbow to guide her steps. Through the trees, she glimpsed movement, large shapes against the snow. Elk, Luke breathed in her ear. Whole herd. Evelyn's heart raced as she watched 20 or more elk grazing in the protected meadow. Cows and calves mostly, with 2 young bulls standing guard. They were magnificent, larger than she'd imagined, their breath steaming in the cold air. They're beautiful, she whispered. Luke's smile transformed his weathered face. First time I saw elk, I was 15. Thought they were something out of a fairy tale. She could picture it, a younger Luke, face unmarked by tragedy, filled with wonder at the natural world. It made her heart ache for all he'd lost, all they'd both lost. A branch cracked somewhere behind them. The lead bull's head shot up, nostrils flaring. In seconds, the entire herd was in motion, flowing across the meadow like a brown river, disappearing into the far trees. Wind shifted, Luke explained. Rising, caught our scent. As they walked back to the horses, Evelyn stumbled on a hidden root. Luke caught her arm, steadying her, and for a moment they stood frozen, faces close, breath mingling in the cold air, awareness crackling between them. Mary, he said, voice rough. I'm all right, she said quickly, stepping back. But the moment lingered, charging the air between them. They rode home as afternoon shadows lengthened. Conversation stilted now, both aware of lines they were approaching but not ready to cross. That evening, Evelyn attempted to make stew from the rabbit Luke had trapped. She'd watched him do it several times, but her hands shook as she skinned the carcass, remembering his steadying touch on the mountain. Need help? Luke appeared at her shoulder. I can manage. But the knife slipped, nicking her finger. Drat! Before she could react, Luke had taken her hand, examining the small cut. His calloused thumb brushed away the blood, gentle despite its roughness. Not deep, he said, but didn't release her hand immediately. Their eyes met, held. The cabin suddenly felt too warm, too small. "Luke," she breathed. He released her hand as if burned. "I'll finish the rabbit. You should rest." But rest was impossible. Evelyn paced the small cabin, aware of Luke's every movement, every breath. When had awareness become attraction? When had gratitude transformed into something deeper, more dangerous? After a silent supper, they took their usual places by the fire, but instead of reading, Evelyn found herself watching Luke work, the sure movements of his hands as he repaired a bridle, the way firelight played across his features, the occasional furrow of concentration between his brows. "You're staring," he said without looking up. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Don't apologize." He set down the leather, meeting her eyes. "I've been doing the same when you're not looking." The admission hung between them, honest and terrifying. We shouldn't," Evelyn stumbled over words. "I know." Luke's voice was steady, but his hands clenched. "You'll leave come spring. Go back to whatever life you ran from. And I'll—" "Stay here alone?" The thought made her chest tight. "Luke, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He stood abruptly. "I made my choice 3 years ago. This is my penance. For something that wasn't your fault. Fault doesn't matter. Jenny's still dead. And punishing yourself won't bring her back." The words burst out harsher than intended. "Do you think she'd want this? Want you buried alive in these mountains? You don't know what she'd want. You don't know—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "I know she was 12. Evelyn rose, facing him across the small space. "I know she did her sewing while you were working. I know you probably brought her ribbons from town and teased her about the boys who'd come courting someday. I know because you're that kind of man, the kind who'd be a good brother, who'd—" "Stop." The word was raw, torn from somewhere deep. "I know she loved you," Evelyn continued, softer now. "And that love doesn't die just because the person does. She wouldn't want this for you." Luke turned away, shoulders rigid. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Sometimes I can't remember her face. Try so hard, but it slips away. All I see is how I found her." Without thinking, Evelyn crossed to him, laying a hand on his back. She felt him shudder. "Tell me about her. Not that day, before. Help me know her." For a long moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then, slowly, he began to speak. She had our mother's eyes, green as summer grass, hair like wheat. Always wore it in braids, but pieces would escape, drive her crazy. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Loved to sing while she worked. Couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but that never stopped her. What did she sing? Church hymns mostly. Amazing Grace was her favorite. He hummed a few bars, voice cracking. She'd make up words when she forgot the real ones. Evelyn smiled, seeing it, a young girl, safe and loved, singing badly while her brother pretended annoyance but secretly treasured every note. "She sounds wonderful. She was bossy little thing too. Had opinions about everything, my clothes, my manners, the girls in town." His voice warmed with memory. "Said I was too particular, that I'd end up a lonely old bachelor if I didn't stop finding fault with every woman I met." "Was she right?" Luke turned then, looking down at her. The raw pain had softened into something else, sadness mixed with a tender awareness that made her breath catch. Maybe I was waiting." "For what?" His hand rose, hovering near her cheek before dropping. "For someone who could look at what I am and not flinch." "I see you," Evelyn whispered. "All of you. And I'm not flinching." The fire crackled. Wind sighed around the cabin walls. Time stretched between them, full of possibility and fear. Luke's hand rose again, this time completing the journey to cup her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "Mary, or whoever you are, this isn't wise. I know." She leaned into his touch. "I don't care." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, tentative, questioning, then with growing certainty. Evelyn had been kissed before, chased society pecks. Theodore's possessive claims, but never like this, never with such careful passion, such restrained hunger. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, Luke rested his forehead against hers. "I've got nothing to offer you. This cabin, this life, it's not meant for a woman like you." "A woman like me?" She pulled back slightly. "You don't know who I am." "I know enough. Know your quality hiding is common. Know you're running from something that scared you worse than freezing to death." His hands framed her face. "Know you'll have to go back eventually. Face whatever it is." "Not tonight," she said fiercely. "Tonight I'm just Mary. Tonight you're just Luke. Can that be enough?" Instead of answering, he kissed her again, deeper this time, arms pulling her against him. Evelyn melted into his warmth, feeling safe for the first time in months. When his lips traced her jaw, found that sensitive spot below her ear, she gasped. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her skin. "Tell me this is wrong." "I can't." Her hands fisted in his shirt. "Luke, I can't." With a groan, he swept her up, carrying her to his bed. But once there, he hesitated, searching her face. "You're sure?" For answer, she drew him down for another kiss. Everything else, Theodore, her father's betrayal, society's expectations, faded away. There was only this, Luke's gentle hands, his whispered endearments, the tenderness with which he worshipped her body, later held secure in his arms with furs pulled over their cooling skin. Evelyn traced patterns on his chest. "No regrets?" Luke asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "None." She'd never spoken truer words. "Luke? Thank you. For seeing me, not the runaway, not the lady playing at being common, just me." His arms tightened. "Thank you for the same." They lay quietly, listening to the fire die to embers. Outside, snow began falling again, sealing them into their private world. Evelyn knew morning would bring complications, questions, the inevitable intrusion of reality. But for tonight, she was home. Not in a place, but in the arms of a man who'd shown her strength could be gentle. That broken didn't mean worthless. That sometimes two damaged souls could create something whole. "Sleep, sweetheart," Luke murmured, already drifting off. Sweetheart. Such a simple endearment, but it pierced her heart. She pressed closer, memorizing his warmth, his scent, the steady beat of his heart under her palm. Tomorrow would come with all its troubles. But tonight she was Mary. He was Luke, and love was uncomplicated as snow falling on mountain peaks. It was enough. It was everything. Morning light filtered through frost-covered windows, finding Evelyn alone in the bed. She could hear Luke moving about outside, the steady rhythm of an axe biting into wood. For a moment, she buried her face in the pillow that still held his scent, wondering if last night had changed everything or nothing at all. When she emerged, dressed and hair hastily pinned, Luke was stacking split logs against the cabin wall. He glanced up, and something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or regret. "Coffee's hot," he said, returning to his work. The distance in his voice stung. Evelyn poured herself a cup with hands that barely trembled, then stepped outside. "Luke needs doing." He didn't look at her. "Storm coming in a few days. Need to be ready?" "That's not what I meant." He set down the axe, finally meeting her eyes. "Mary, last night was a mistake?" She lifted her chin, pride armoring her against the hurt. "No." The word came quick, firm. "Never that, but it was. Unwise. Because I'll leave come spring. Because you're not Mary." He stepped closer, voice gentling. "I don't need your real name, don't need your story, but I know you're running from something, someone that'll come looking eventually. And when they do, they won't find me here." "Won't they?" Luke's jaw tightened. "You think men with money and power just let what's theirs walk away? You think they won't hire Pinkertons, trackers, offer rewards?" The truth of it hit her like cold water. She'd been so focused on escape, on survival, she hadn't thought past winter. But Theodore Blackwood wouldn't simply accept her disappearance. His pride alone would demand her return, not to mention the financial salvation her dowry represented. "I won't go back," she whispered. "I can't." "Then tell me why." Luke caught her shoulders, gentle but insistent. "Trust me that far at least. Let me know what we're facing." The "we" nearly undid her. After a lifetime of facing battles alone, the simple inclusion was overwhelming. "All right," she said quietly. "But inside, it's a long story." They settled by the fire, coffee cooling between them as Evelyn found her courage. Then, haltingly at first, she told him everything. Her true name, Evelyn Whitmore, the arranged marriage to Theodore Blackwood, the discovered debts, the suspicious death of his first wife, her desperate flight. Luke listened without interruption, his expression darkening as she described Theodore's possessive behavior, the way society had trapped her as surely as any cage. "Should have taken more care," she finished. "Should have planned better, but I was so frightened, and time was running out." "You did what you had to." Luke's voice was rough. "Any woman would have run from that. A proper lady would have done her duty, married him, borne his children, turned a blind eye to whatever he did as long as appearances were maintained." Bitterness crept into her tone. "That's what my mother expected, what society demanded." "To hell with society." The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. "No one has the right to sell you like cattle, force you into bed with a man you fear." He stopped abruptly, color rising in his weathered cheeks. "Luke." She reached for his hand. "What we shared last night, that was choice. My choice. Don't turn it into something ugly because of what I've told you." He turned her hand over, tracing her palm with one finger. "You deserve better than a broken-down lawman hiding in the mountains. And you deserve better than a runaway heiress who can't even make proper coffee." She managed a small smile. "Perhaps we're well matched in our unworthiness." That drew an answering smile from him. "Your coffee's improving." "Liar." "Well, it's not getting worse." They sat quietly, hands linked, processing the new knowledge between them. Finally, Luke spoke. "Come spring, when the pass is clear, we'll need a plan. Can't stay here forever, much as I might want to. They'll expand the search, and eventually someone will remember seeing a woman heading into the territories." "I know." The thought of leaving this sanctuary made her chest tight. I need time to think. We have time. Winter's not done with us yet." He squeezed her hand. "But Evelyn." "I prefer Mary." She interrupted. "Evelyn was that frightened girl in silk dresses. Mary is who I'm becoming." Understanding softened his features. "All right, Mary it is, but we'll need to be careful. No trips to town, no visibility. If someone comes asking, 'I'm your wife,'" she said impulsively. "We married last fall, just before the snows. I came from back east to join you." Luke stared at her. That might work, but folks in town know I live alone. People change, even hermits." She warmed to the idea. "We could say we corresponded after your sister's death, that I was a distant cousin of someone you knew in Colorado. It explains why I'm unfamiliar with frontier life." "You've thought about this." Heat touched her cheeks. "Perhaps a little. It would protect us both. A married woman isn't questioned the same way." "And when spring comes? When you leave?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Evelyn pulled her hand free, suddenly needing distance. "We'll say I died. Pneumonia, or childbirth, or any of the dozen things that kill women out here. You'll be the grieving widower, left alone again." She stood, pacing to the window. "It's tidy, believable." "Is that what you want?" She whirled to face him. "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is staying hidden until I can figure out where to go, how to disappear completely. California, maybe, or Oregon. That's not what I asked." Luke rose, crossing to her in 2 strides. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "What do you want, Mary? Not what's practical or safe or smart. What do you want?" "I want to stay," she whispered, tears threatening. "I want to wake up next to you every morning and learn all your moods. I want to see spring come to these mountains, watch summer brown your skin darker, help you prepare for next winter. I want—" He kissed her, swallowing the rest of her impossible dreams. When they parted, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Then stay. Luke, I mean it. Stay." His thumbs brushed away the tears that had escaped. "We'll face whatever comes, together." "You don't understand the kind of power my father wields. The resources Theodore can marshal, they'll—" "I survived 3 years as a wanted man before I cleared my name. I know how to disappear, how to read threats before they materialize." His voice was steady, certain. "More importantly, I know these mountains like you know those society ballrooms. This is my territory." "Our territory?" she corrected softly. "Ours," he agreed, and kissed her again. The next weeks passed in a strange mixture of domestic bliss and underlying tension. They fell into the rhythms of a long married couple, working side by side during the day, sharing meals and conversation, making love with increasing passion and tenderness at night. Luke taught her to shoot, setting up targets behind the cabin. "Squeeze, don't jerk," he instructed, standing behind her, steadying her arms. "The rifle's your friend, not your enemy." The first time she hit the target dead center, she whooped with delight, turning to throw her arms around his neck. He spun her around, laughing, a sound she was hearing more often now. "Knew you had it in you," he said, setting her down but keeping her close. "You're a natural. I have a good teacher. Flattery won't get you out of practice. Again." She mock saluted and returned to her stance, but as she sighted down the barrel, she felt a fierce satisfaction. Each skill Luke taught her was another step away from the helpless girl who'd fled New York. Mary, the woman she was becoming, could shoot, trap, navigate by stars, read weather signs. Mary was strong. One evening, as they worked together preparing rabbit stew, she skinning while he chopped vegetables, Luke surprised her. "My mother would have liked you." Evelyn glanced up. He rarely spoke of family beyond Jenny. "Would she?" She was strong like you. Came from Boston originally. Scandalized her family by marrying a frontier sheriff." His smile was distant, fond. "She adapted to the life, but never lost her refinement. Used to read Shakespeare to us by candlelight, insisted on proper grammar even when we were mucking stalls. She sounds wonderful. Died when I was 20. Fever took her quick." He added vegetables to the pot. "Movements, economical. Jenny was only 8. I tried to be both brother and parent after that." Evelyn covered his hand with hers. "You did well. The way you speak of her, she was loved. Luke, deeply loved. Not enough to protect her." "Love isn't a shield against all harm. If it were, no one who was loved would ever suffer." She thought of her own brother James, wondered if he was searching for her. "We do our best. Sometimes it's not enough, but that doesn't diminish the love." He turned his hand to clasp hers. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between learning to skin rabbits and shoot straight." That night, as they lay entwined, Luke traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I've been thinking about spring," he said quietly. Evelyn tensed. They'd avoided the subject by mutual agreement, living in their winter bubble. "Oh?" "The Marstons, down in the valley. They're talking about heading to Oregon, selling their place cheap." He paused. "It's more exposed than here, but the land's better. Could run some cattle, maybe horses, build a real life." "Luke, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time I stopped hiding. Time we stopped hiding." He propped himself on an elbow, looking down at her. "Marry me. Marry, real and legal. We'll buy the Marston place. Start fresh. If trouble comes, we'll face it together." Her heart raced. "You don't have to." "I want to." His free hand cupped her cheek. "Not because you need protection, though I'll give you that too. Because I love you. Because the thought of you leaving come spring is like contemplating cutting out my own heart." "Luke, I know it's not the life you were raised for. No, I can't give you silks and servants and whatever else. She silenced him with a kiss. When she could speak, her voice was thick with tears. I don't want that life. I ran from that life. What I want is you, this, us. Is that a yes? Yes. She laughed through her tears. Yes, you impossible man. He kissed her deeply, rolled her beneath him, showed her without words how precious she was to him. Later, as dawn crept toward the windows, they made plans in whispers. We'll ride down to the valley next week, Luke said. Talk to Reverend Mills. Make it official. Tell folks you're my mail-order bride if anyone asks. A very poor one, Evelyn murmured against his chest. Can barely cook, shoots adequately, reads too much. Sounds perfect to me. But their plans were interrupted 3 days later. Luke had ridden to check his furthest trap lines when Evelyn heard horses approaching. She grabbed the rifle as he taught her, checked the load, and positioned herself by the window. 2 men, strangers both, riding horses that screamed money and authority. Her blood ran cold. They dismounted near the cabin, and one called out, Hello, the house, looking for Luke Harlan. Evelyn's mind raced. Hide, pretend absence, but smoke rose from the chimney, clearly announcing occupation. She opened the door, rifle held casually but ready. He's out, expected back soon. The men exchanged glances. The older one, gray-bearded with sharp eyes, touched his hat. Afternoon, ma'am. So, didn't know Harlan had taken a wife? Recent development. She kept her voice steady, letting a hint of mountain drawl creep in. Something I can help you gentlemen with? Name's Morrison. This is Baker. We're looking for a woman might have passed this way. Young, blonde, probably in some distress. He produced a photograph. Substantial reward for information. Evelyn's likeness stared back at her. A studio portrait from last spring, her hair elaborately styled, wearing diamonds and silk. It looked nothing like the woman she'd become. Haven't seen anyone like that. She pretended to study the image. Course, we don't get many visitors up here. She in some kind of trouble. Runaway, Baker said curtly. Family's worried sick. Well, I'll keep an eye out, though hard to imagine a lady like that surviving long in these mountains. She handed back the photograph. You gentlemen are welcome to water your horses before you go. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Studying her, Evelyn kept her expression mildly curious, bored even, while her heart hammered against her ribs. Appreciated. Ma'am, your husband, he ever mention a woman coming through? My husband doesn't talk much about anything besides trapping and horses. She allowed fond exasperation to color her tone. Man of few words. My Luke. How long you been married? The question was too casual. Evelyn smiled. 3 months come Tuesday. Why? No reason, just making conversation. But Morrison's eyes remained sharp. Well, we'll let you get back to your day. If you do see or hear anything, I'll send Luke down to town with word. She nodded politely. Safe travels, gentlemen. She watched them mount and ride away, staying by the window until they disappeared into the trees. Only then did she allow herself to shake. When Luke returned at sunset, she met him at the door, words tumbling out. His face darkened as she described the visitors. Pinkertons, most likely, he said, checking the rifle loads, barring the door. They'll be back. They didn't recognize me. Maybe not, but they're suspicious. Morrison especially, he's got that look. Luke pulled her close. We might need to move sooner than planned. To the valley? Further maybe, Oregon, California. Somewhere the Whitmore name carries less weight. She pulled back to look at him. You do that? Leave everything? Everything I need is right here, he said simply. The rest is just geography. That night, they held each other closer, aware that their winter sanctuary was ending. The world had found them, as they'd always known it would. But as Evelyn listened to Luke's steady breathing, felt the solid warmth of him beside her, she found her fear tempered with determination. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd collapsed in the snow. She was Mary Harlan, or would be soon, a woman who could shoot straight and survive winter and face down Pinkerton agents without flinching. Let them come. She and Luke would be ready. The decision to leave came harder than expected. As dawn broke over the mountains, Evelyn stood in the doorway of the cabin that had become her sanctuary, memorizing every detail: the rough-hewn logs Luke had shaped with his own hands, the stone chimney where she'd learned to bank a fire, the lean-to where Storm nickered softly in greeting. Second thoughts. Luke appeared behind her, arms sliding around her waist. "No." She leaned back against his solid warmth. "Just grateful. This place gave me back myself. You were always there, just needed room to breathe." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Ready?" She nodded. Though her heart ached, they'd packed light, only essentials and the few precious items that mattered. Luke's books, her wedding dress, the plain one she'd worn when Reverend Mills married them properly a week ago, the rifle she'd learned to shoot straight. The plan was simple. Ride to Cedar Falls, the larger town 2 valleys over, where she could find work at the boarding house run by Luke's friend's widow. Luke would return to close up the cabin, sell what they couldn't take, and join her within the week. Traveling separately drew less attention, made them harder to track. "I still don't like you going alone," Luke said for the 10th time as he checked Storm's saddle. "We've been through this." Evelyn, Mary now, even in her own thoughts, swung up onto the mare's back with hard-won grace. "A woman traveling alone is invisible. A couple is memorable. You're too damn sensible sometimes." But his worried expression softened as he looked up at her. "Mrs. Harlan." "Mr. Harlan." She leaned down for a kiss that lingered longer than wise. "1 week, then we start our new life. Oregon, or California, or Alaska, wherever the trail takes us, as long as we're together." He squeezed her hand once more, then stepped back. "Keep the rifle handy. Trust your instincts. If anything feels wrong, I'll handle it." She smiled, projecting more confidence than she felt. "You taught me well." The ride to Cedar Falls took 2 days through terrain that would have terrified her months ago. Now she navigated the mountain paths with careful competence, camping one night in a sheltered grove Luke had shown her. She kept the fire small, slept light with the rifle close, and woke to find deer tracks circling her camp, curious but harmless. Cedar Falls sprawled larger than the mining camp near Luke's cabin, boasting 2 hotels, multiple saloons, and actual storefronts with glass windows. Mary found the boarding house easily, a tidy 2-story building with Mrs. Catherine Walsh, proprietress, painted on a hanging sign. Catherine Walsh proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and work-worn hands. She looked Mary up and down, taking in the plain clothes and weather-burned cheeks. "Luke Harlan's wife. Are you?" "Yes, ma'am. He said you might have work available." "Might do." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Luke's good people. Helped me out when my Robert died. Wouldn't take payment. You cook?" "Learning. I'm better at cleaning, mending, tending animals. Honest, at least." Catherine named a wage that was fair, if not generous. "Room and board included. No male visitors after dark. No drinking. No trouble." "Understood. Then you can start tomorrow. Room's at the top of the stairs. 3rd door. Supper's at 6. Mary settled into the small but clean room with relief. 1 week, she told herself. 1 week of anonymity in this busy town. Then she and Luke would disappear entirely. She should have known better. The boarding house served miners, traveling salesmen, and occasional families passing through. Mary threw herself into the work, scrubbing floors, washing linens, serving meals with quiet efficiency. She kept her head down, spoke little, deflected the few advances from lonely miners with firm politeness. On her 3rd day, trouble walked through the door in a familiar form. She was clearing breakfast dishes when she heard the voice, cultured, authoritative, asking Catherine about available rooms. Every muscle in her body locked as Senator Theodore Blackwood stepped into the dining room. He looked exactly as she remembered, immaculate despite the frontier setting. Gray eyes scanning the room with proprietary confidence. Those eyes passed over her without recognition, in her plain dress and apron, with her hair severely pinned and her face weathered by mountain winter. She was invisible, just another servant. "I'm looking for someone," Theodore told Catherine as Mary forced herself to continue clearing tables with steady hands. "My fiancée, she went missing several months ago, and I have reason to believe she passed through this area." He produced the same photograph Morrison had shown her. Catherine studied it with polite interest. "Pretty girl. Haven't seen her, but I can ask around." "There's a substantial reward." Theodore's smile was all teeth. "She's delicate, not well. Her family fears for her safety." Mary nearly snorted at the lie but caught herself. She moved past Theodore to reach another table, careful to keep her face averted. "I'll be staying several days," Theodore continued. "Perhaps you could recommend someone familiar with the area? I'd like to hire a guide. Samuel Tucker knows these mountains well as anyone." Catherine offered, "Usually drinks at the Silver Dollar come evening." Mary escaped to the kitchen, hands shaking as she dumped dishes into the wash basin. Through the thin walls, she could hear Theodore taking a room, the best one, of course. Her mind raced. She needed to warn Luke, needed to leave, needed— "Mary!" Catherine's sharp voice made her jump. "Take fresh linens up to room 4. Room 4. Theodore's room. Mary's stomach clenched, but refusing would draw attention. She gathered the linens with wooden movements, praying her disguise would hold. The room was empty when she entered, Theodore presumably gone to hire his guide. She worked quickly, military corners on the bed, fresh water in the basin. As she turned to leave, her eyes caught on an open valise, papers visible within, legal documents, correspondence, without conscious decision. She moved closer. A letter on top bore her father's letterhead, his cramped writing visible. Imperative she be found before scandal breaks. The Ashford girl is willing but demands explanation for broken engagement. Stock prices affected by uncertainty. Use whatever means necessary. Whatever means necessary. The words chilled her. She knew what Theodore was capable of, what her father would sanction to protect the family fortune. Footsteps in the hallway. Mary dropped the letter and hurried out, nearly colliding with Theodore in the doorway. "Watch yourself," he snapped, then paused. His eyes narrowed, studying her face. Mary ducked her head, mumbling apologies in an affected Irish accent. After an endless moment, he stepped aside. "Clumsy creature," she heard him mutter as she fled. That night, she lay rigid in her narrow bed, analyzing every interaction. Had he recognized her? Was he playing some game? She needed to get word to Luke, but leaving now would confirm suspicions if Theodore was watching. The next morning brought worse news. Theodore appeared at breakfast with Samuel Tucker and Morrison, the Pinkerton agent. "Interesting news," Theodore announced to the dining room at large, though his eyes swept the space calculatingly. "Mr. Morrison here tells me a trapper up mountain has recently taken a wife, a woman who appeared rather suddenly." Mary served coffee with steady hands, though her heart thundered. Conversations continued around Theodore. The boarding house regulars had little interest in rich men's dramas, but she felt Morrison's eyes tracking her movements. "Could be anyone," Catherine said when Theodore pressed for information about Luke Harlan. "Men take wives all the time out here. Mail-order brides, relatives from back east, women from the camps. Nothing unusual." "This woman might have been unusually refined," Morrison interjected. "Educated, out of place." Catherine snorted. "Half the women in the territories are out of place. Mr. Morrison, we make do." But the seed was planted. Mary overheard Theodore arranging to ride out the next day, to visit this mysterious trapper and his new wife. That night, she made her decision. She waited until the boarding house settled into sleep, then slipped out through the kitchen door. Storm waited in the stable, saddled and ready. Mary had paid a boy to prepare her, claiming an early morning errand. The moon was new, darkness complete save for stars. Good for avoiding detection, dangerous for mountain travel. But Mary had no choice. She had to reach Luke first, had to warn him. She was 5 miles out of town when she heard hoofbeats behind her, urging Storm off the trail. She waited in a stand of pines, Rifle ready. The rider came fast, too fast for safety in the darkness. As he passed, moonlight caught his profile. Morrison. He was following her trail. She realized with cold certainty. Had probably been watching the boarding house, waiting for her to bolt. Mary waited until his hoofbeats faded, then urged Storm back onto the trail at a careful walk. Let him ride ahead. She knew a different route, longer but less traveled. Luke had shown her weeks ago, made her memorize the landmarks. The detour added hours to her journey. Dawn was breaking when she finally saw the cabin, smoke rising from the chimney like a beacon of home. "Luke!" She practically fell from Storm's back as he emerged, rifle in hand. "Mary, what's wrong?" He caught her as her knees buckled from exhaustion. "You're supposed to be... Theodore's here, in Cedar Falls, with Pinkertons." The words tumbled out as he half-carried her inside. "They know about us, about you taking a wife. They're coming. Slow down." He settled her by the fire, pressing a cup of hot coffee into her hands. "Start from the beginning." She told him everything. Theodore's arrival, the overheard plans, Morrison following her. Luke's expression darkened with each detail. "How long do we have?" "Hours at most. Morrison was ahead of me. But he doesn't know the cutoff trail. And Theodore won't ride out until full light." A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses, multiple riders. Luke moved to the window, peered out. 3 men, Morrison and 2 others. Not Blackwood, though. He'd never dirty his hands directly. Mary checked her rifle, hands steady despite her exhaustion. "What do we do?" "We don't run." Luke's voice was granite. "This is my land, our land, and I'm done letting others drive me from my home." He positioned her by the side window. "Anyone tries to flank us, you discourage them. Don't kill unless you must, but make it clear we're not easy prey. Luke, trust me." He kissed her quickly, fiercely. "We're going to get through this." Morrison's voice rang out from beyond the door. "Harlan, we know the woman's in there. Send her out, and there's no trouble for you." "The lady is my wife," Luke called back. "And she's going nowhere she doesn't choose to." "She's not your wife. Harlan, she's Evelyn Whitmore, engaged to Senator Blackwood. There's warrants for kidnapping if you don't cooperate." Mary almost laughed at the lie. "I'm Mary Harlan," she shouted. "I have a marriage certificate that says so, and I'll thank you to get off our property." Silence. Then Morrison again. "Mrs. Whitmore, your father is worried. Senator Blackwood is concerned for your welfare. They only want you home safe. This is my home." Movement at the tree line caught her eye. One of Morrison's men, trying to circle the cabin. Mary fired, the shot splintering bark inches from his head. The man dove for cover. "That's your only warning." Luke called out. "Next one won't miss." For long minutes, nothing moved. Then Morrison tried again. "There's a bounty on you. Harlan, that old Colorado warrant might be cleared, but men have long memories. Word gets out you're harboring a runaway heiress. Every bounty hunter in 3 territories will come calling. Let them come." Luke's voice was steady. "I've faced worse than bounty hunters." Mary saw it first, smoke rising from the stable. "Luke, they're burning," he cursed, moving to her window. The horses were screaming now, Storm's voice recognizable among them. "Cover me," Luke said grimly. "I'm going for the horses." "Luke, no, it's what they want!" But he was already moving. Mary fired steadily, keeping Morrison's men pinned as Luke sprinted for the stable. She saw him disappear inside, smoke billowing thicker. A figure broke from cover, Morrison himself, moving to intercept Luke's return. Mary swung her rifle, but the angle was wrong, trees blocking her shot. Then everything happened at once. Luke emerged from the smoke, leading the terrified horses. Morrison raised his pistol. Mary screamed a warning. The shot was impossibly loud in the morning air. But it was Morrison who fell, clutching his shoulder. Behind him, Theodore Blackwood lowered a smoking derringer, his face a mask of cold fury. "Idiots!" Theodore snarled at the remaining Pinkertons. "I said no killing. Dead women can't sign marriage contracts." Luke had frozen, horses milling around him. Mary kept her rifle trained on Theodore as he stepped over Morrison's groaning form. "Miss Whitmore?" Theodore called, not even glancing at Luke. "This foolishness has gone on long enough. Your father has agreed to improved terms, a larger household budget, a townhouse of your own in Washington. All you need do is honor our engagement." "I'm already married," Mary called back. Theodore's laugh was ugly. "To this saddle tramp? Please, no court will recognize it. You were clearly coerced, confused, taken advantage of in your delicate state. The only confused one here is you." Mary stepped onto the porch, rifle steady. "I chose Luke. I choose this life. And if you take one more step, I'll choose to put a bullet in you." Theodore's face darkened. "You wouldn't dare. You're a lady. Despite this play acting, ladies don't—" Mary fired. The shot took Theodore's hat off, sent it spinning into the mud. "This lady does." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Theodore's eyes. This wasn't the frightened girl he'd cornered in New York ballrooms. This was someone harder, stronger, infinitely more dangerous. "Your father will cut you off," he tried. "No money, no connections, no place in society." "Good." Mary smiled, all teeth. "I never wanted any of it anyway." Luke had reached the porch now, his own rifle covering the remaining men. "You heard my wife. Get off our land. Don't come back." "This isn't over," Theodore began. "Yes, it is." Mary's voice was steel. "You go back to New York. Tell my father I'm dead if you want. Drowned, frozen, eaten by wolves. I don't care. Marry the Ashford girl. Save your fortune. But if you ever come near us again, if you send anyone after us, I'll come for you myself. And unlike you, I keep my promises." Something in her face must have convinced him. Theodore stepped back, motioned to his men. Morrison, supported between them, managed to mount his horse. "You're making a mistake," Theodore said finally. "You'll regret this barbaric life, this crude man. And when you do, I'll be too busy being happy to notice." Mary lowered her rifle slightly. "Goodbye, Theodore. Don't let the mountains bite you on the way out." They watched until the riders disappeared into the trees. Only then did Mary let the rifle slip from nerveless fingers, her knees buckling. Luke caught her, held her tight. "It's over," he murmured. "You did it. You faced them down." "We did it." She pulled back to look at him, laughing through sudden tears. "Did you see his face when I shot his hat? Reminded me to never make you angry." He kissed her soundly. "Mrs. Harlan, you think they'll actually leave us alone?" "Theodore will. You put the fear of God in him." Luke's expression sobered. "Might be others, though. Morrison was right about bounty hunters." "Then we'd better get moving." Mary straightened, looking at their cabin one last time. "Oregon's nice this time of year, I hear." "Anywhere's nice with you." They worked quickly, salvaging what they could. The stable was damaged but not destroyed. Morrison's men had been sloppy in their arson. Within hours, they were packed and mounted. As they rode away, Mary turned for one last look. The cabin stood solid against the mountain backdrop. Smoke still wisping from the chimney, her sanctuary, her place of transformation. "We'll build another one," Luke said, reading her thoughts. "Better one, with a real floor and glass windows. And a library," Mary added, "for all those books you pretend you don't love. And a sewing room, for when you finally learn to thread a needle properly." She laughed, spurring Storm forward. "Race you to the ridge?" "You're on." They galloped toward the rising sun, leaving the past behind. Somewhere ahead lay Oregon, California, a future neither could fully imagine, but they'd face it together. Luke Harlan and his unlikely wife, both running from shadows, both running toward light. The mountains watched them go, keeping their secrets as mountains do. And if the wind sometimes carried the echo of laughter, of two souls finding freedom in the wilderness, well, that was just another story the peaks would never tell. The trail to Oregon stretched endlessly before them, but 3 days out from the cabin, their luck ran out. They'd stopped to rest the horses at a creek when Luke spotted the dust cloud. Riders approaching fast from the east. "Into the rocks," he commanded. Already moving. "Quick!" They scrambled up a steep slope, leading the horses into a maze of boulders. Below, 6 men thundered past, then wheeled back, studying the ground. "Bounty hunters," Luke muttered, recognizing the type. Morrison must have talked before he left town. One rider dismounted, examining their tracks, even from distance. Mary could see his competence in the way he read the signs. These weren't Theodore's city-bred Pinkertons. These were dangerous men who knew the territory. "They'll find us," she whispered. "Not if we move smart." Luke studied the terrain with calculating eyes. "There's a box canyon about 2 miles north, only one way in or out. They'll think we're trapped. Won't we be?" His smile was grim. "You'll see. Can you make it?" She nodded, though exhaustion weighed her bones. They'd been riding hard, sleeping little, the stress of constant vigilance taking its toll. They moved carefully through the rocks, Luke placing each step to minimize tracks. Behind them, shouts indicated the hunters had found their trail. The canyon entrance loomed, narrow walls rising sheer on both sides. "Trust me," Luke said, spurring Buck forward. The canyon twisted and turned, walls closing tighter with each bend. Mary's heart hammered as hoofbeats echoed behind them. The hunters had taken the bait. At the canyon's end, disaster waited. The path terminated in a box, sheer cliffs on 3 sides. No visible escape. "Luke, here!" He leaped from Buck, pulling at what looked like solid rock. A section swung back, revealing a narrow crevice. "Old Ute escape route. Found it years back." They led the horses through single file, the passage so tight the saddles scraped stone. Behind them, the hunters' shouts grew louder. The passage opened into a hidden valley, another trail leading up the far side. "Go!" Luke ordered. "Up and over. I'll slow them down. Not without you. Mary, go!" He was already positioning rocks to block the entrance. "I'll be right behind." She climbed, Storm struggling on the steep grade. Gunshots cracked below. The hunters had reached the box canyon. Luke appeared, scrambling up as rifle fire whined off rocks around him. At the ridge top, he grabbed his rifle, firing down at their pursuers. "That'll make them think twice. Come on!" They rode through the night, pushing the exhausted horses. Dawn found them at another creek, both humans and animals desperate for rest. "We can't keep running like this," Mary said, watching Luke grimly clean his rifle. "The horses won't make it." "I know." He looked older, worn down by days of flight. "There's a town ahead. Garrison. Telegraph office there." "Luke, no. Towns mean exposure. Also means law. These bounty hunters are operating on old paper, probably not even legal anymore." He met her eyes. "I'm tired of running. Mary, time to fight back different." Garrison sprawled larger than Cedar Falls, a proper frontier town with pretensions to civilization. They entered separately, Luke first to scout, Mary an hour later. The plan was simple: send telegrams to territorial authorities, establish their legal marriage, make pursuing them more trouble than any bounty was worth. Mary found lodging at a respectable hotel, signing the register as Mrs. Mary Harlan, with steady hands. The clerk barely glanced at her, too busy with a party of Eastern investors examining mining claims. She'd just reached her room when commotion erupted outside. From her window, she saw Luke in the street, surrounded by armed men. Her blood froze as she recognized the lead bounty hunter from the canyon. "Worth $5,000. Boys," the hunter was saying. "Split 6 ways. That's good money. I told you." Luke's voice carried clearly. "That warrant's been cleared. Check with the Colorado authorities." "Takes time to check. Meanwhile, you're coming with us." Mary grabbed her rifle, then stopped. Violence would only confirm their guilt in the town's eyes. Instead, she smoothed her dress, pinned her hair properly, and marched downstairs. "Excuse me," her cultured voice cut through the crowd that had gathered. "What is the meaning of this?" The hunters turned, taking in her respectable appearance. She pushed through to Luke's side, I am Mrs. Mary Harlan, and I demand to know why you're accosting my husband." The lead hunter, a scarred man named Briggs, sneered. "Your husband's got a price on his head. Lady, we're collecting." "On what authority? Show me your papers." Briggs produced a worn wanted poster. Mary examined it with deliberate thoroughness. "This warrant is 3 years old and references charges in Colorado. My husband's name was cleared in that matter." She handed it back dismissively. "You're operating on false information, sir. Maybe so, maybe not. Let the law sort it out." "The law is sorting it out." A new voice interrupted. The crowd parted for a tall man wearing a marshal's star. "Tom Garrett, Territorial Marshal. Got your telegram. Harlan." Luke's eyes widened slightly. They hadn't sent any telegrams yet. But Mary caught on quick. "Marshal Garrett. Thank goodness. These men are harassing us based on outdated information." Garrett studied the wanted poster. Then Briggs. "This paper's no good. Colorado sent word months ago. Harlan was cleared of all charges. You boys are about 1 step away from kidnapping charges yourselves." "Now wait a minute," Briggs started. "No, you wait." Garrett's hand rested on his pistol. "I've got 0 patience for bounty hunters stirring up trouble in my jurisdiction. You've got 1 hour to clear out of Garrison." The hunters grumbled but began dispersing. Briggs shot Luke a venomous look. "This ain't over, Harlan." "Yes," Garrett said firmly. "It is, unless you'd like to discuss it from inside a cell." As the crowd scattered, Garrett turned to Luke and Mary. "Walk with me." They followed him to his office, Mary's mind racing. Inside, Garrett settled behind his desk, studying them. "I didn't send any telegram," Luke said carefully. "I know." Garrett smiled slightly. "But Judge Mills in Cedar Falls did. Seems he felt bad about you folks getting run out of the territory. Sent word to every lawman in 3 territories that you're legally married and to be left in peace." Mary felt tears threaten. The elderly minister who'd married them had seemed kind, but she hadn't expected this. "Question is," Garrett continued, "what are you planning now? Because Briggs was right about one thing. This ain't over, not with the kind of money being thrown around." "We're heading to Oregon," Luke said. "Start fresh. Build something away from all this." Garrett nodded slowly. "Might have a better idea. You know Bill Hutchinson?" Luke frowned. "Heard the name. Runs freight lines." "Among other things. He's also territorial commissioner, and he owes me favors." Garrett leaned back. "Happens he needs a man to manage security for a new settlement he's backing. Place called Haven Valley, about 50 miles west. Remote enough to discourage casual trouble, but civilized enough for a lady." He glanced at Mary. "No offense, ma'am, but you don't strike me as the type raised to homesteading." "I'm learning," Mary said with dignity. "I'm sure you are, but wouldn't hurt to have a real house, neighbors, maybe a school when young ones come along." The thought of children made her blush, but also filled her with unexpected yearning. A real home, a community, a place to belong. "What's the catch?" Luke asked. "No catch. Hard work, certainly. The settlement needs protecting. Claim jumpers, rustlers, the usual troubles. But it's honest work, good pay, and more importantly, legal standing. Be hard for bounty hunters to grab a territorial commissioner's security chief." Luke looked at Mary. She saw her own hope reflected in his eyes. "We'll take it," she said. Garrett smiled. "Thought you might. I'll wire Hutchinson. Tell him you're coming." He stood, extending his hand to Luke. "Welcome to the right side of the law. Harlan, try to stay there this time." They left Garrison that afternoon with official papers and new purpose. The ride to Haven Valley took 2 days through increasingly beautiful country, rolling hills giving way to a protected valley with a crystal stream running through its heart. The settlement was small but promising, a dozen buildings in various stages of construction, neat plots marked for farms, the skeleton of what would be a church on a small rise. Bill Hutchinson proved to be an energetic man in his 60s with shrewd eyes and a firm handshake. Garrett says you're good people in a bad situation? That about right? Close enough, Luke agreed. Good enough for me. House comes with the job. Nothing fancy, but solid. You'll keep peace, settle disputes, discourage the riffraff. Can you handle that? I was a deputy for 8 years. Luke said, I can handle it. And you, Mrs. Harlan? Remote living suits you? Mary thought of New York's glittering ballrooms, of silk dresses and servants, of a life that had nearly suffocated her. Mr. Hutchinson, I've learned to shoot, trap, skin game, and cook over an open fire. I've faced down bounty hunters and my former fiancée. A proper house with actual walls sounds like paradise. Hutchinson laughed. I like her. Harlan, she'll do well here. The house was simple but real. 2 rooms with wooden floors, glass windows, a proper stove. Mary walked through it in wonder, imagining curtains here, a bookshelf there, maybe a rocking chair by the fire. It's perfect, she breathed. Luke pulled her close. You sure? It's not what you're used to. Stop. She turned in his arms, framing his face with her hands. When will you understand? I don't want what I was used to. I want this. I want you. I want the life we're building together. He kissed her deeply, and she melted into him, feeling truly safe for the first time since leaving the cabin. That night, as they lay in their new bed, a real bed with a proper mattress, Mary traced patterns on Luke's chest. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? Theodore will. You put the fear of God in him, and he's got too much to lose by pursuing this. Luke's hand stroked her hair. Might be a few more bounty hunters sniffing around, but Garrett's protection and Hutchinson's backing should discourage most. And if not, then we face them, together. He tilted her chin up. No more running. Mary, this is our stand. She smiled. I like the sound of that. Our stand, our home, our life. Our future, he added, hand sliding to her still flat belly. All of it. The implications sent warmth through her. Children, a family, things she'd never dared dream of in her gilded cage. I love you, she whispered. My unlikely cowboy. Love you too, he murmured back, my runaway heiress. Outside, wind sighed through the valley, carrying the sound of hammers and saws, a community building itself from hope and determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be disputes to settle, probably more trouble from their past, the hard work of creating something from nothing. But tonight, they were home. Tonight, they were free. Tonight, they were exactly where they belonged, 2 damaged souls who'd found wholeness in each other, building a future neither could have imagined alone. Mary fell asleep to Luke's heartbeat, her own heart full of fierce joy. She'd run from everything she'd known, lost herself in a blizzard, found herself in a mountain cabin. Now, finally, she was ready to stop running and start living. The girl who'd fled New York in terror was gone. In her place stood Mary Harlan, wife, partner, survivor, a woman who could face any storm, as long as Luke stood beside her. And he would. She knew that with bone-deep certainty. They'd won this round, carved out their small piece of happiness. Whatever came next, they'd handle it, together. 3 months had passed in Haven Valley, and Mary had almost allowed herself to believe they were truly safe. The settlement was thriving, new families arriving weekly. Luke had proven himself invaluable, mediating land disputes, organizing protection against rustlers, earning the respect of hardworking people who judged a man by his actions, not his past. Mary had found her own place, helping the new school teacher organize classes, tending sick neighbors with skills learned from a traveling doctor, even starting a small lending library with books donated by settlers. Her belly had begun to round with new life, a secret she and Luke treasured in quiet moments. Then the letter arrived. Luke brought it from town, his face grave. The envelope bore her father's seal, her name written in his precise hand. Miss Evelyn Whitmore. How did he find us? Mary's hands trembled as she took it. Money finds a way. Luke stood behind her chair, hands protective on her shoulders. You don't have to read it. But she was already breaking the seal, unfolding the heavy paper. "My daughter," it began, and she could hear her father's cold voice in every word. "Your theatrics have cost me considerably, both in fortune and reputation. Theodore has withdrawn his suit, as you no doubt intended. The scandal has affected our standing, our business partnerships. Everything your mother and I built. I am prepared to forgive this transgression under certain conditions. You will return immediately. Submit to an examination to confirm your condition. If you are untouched, we will arrange a new match. If not, there are ways to handle such matters discreetly. Your husband will be compensated for his trouble. $10,000 to disappear and never speak of this unfortunate episode. If you refuse, I will have no choice but to take legal action. The marriage is invalid. You wed under a false name, likely under coercion. I have judges who will affirm this. Your husband will face charges of kidnapping, fraud, and corruption of a minor, as you were not of age when you fled. The territorial authorities have been cooperative so far, but federal marshals answer to different masters. You have 1 month to respond. Choose wisely. Your father." Mary set the letter down with steady hands, though rage burned in her chest. "Untouched. Condition. As if I'm livestock to be inspected. Mary? And offering to pay you off?" She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Like you're some fortune hunter who—" Her voice broke. "Is that what people think? That you married me for money?" Luke crossed to her, turning her gently to face him. "I don't give a damn what people think. I married you because I love you, because you're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known, because you make me want to be better than I am." "He'll do it," she whispered. "The federal marshals, the charges, he has that power. Let him try." Luke's jaw set stubbornly. "We've got allies now, too. Hutchinson, Garrett, Judge Mills. The whole town knows our character. Against federal authority, against my father's money and connections?" Mary laughed bitterly. "You don't know him. Luke, he's never lost a fight he truly wanted to win." A knock at the door interrupted them. Luke answered, hand instinctively near his gun. "To find Marshal Garrett himself." "Pardon the intrusion," Garrett said, taking in their tense faces. "But we've got a situation. Judge Harold Blackstone just arrived in town. Federal circuit judge with a reputation for being amenable to wealthy interests." Mary sank into a chair. "My father's judge. Thought as much." Garrett accepted Luke's gesture to enter. "He's not here officially, yet, taking rooms at the hotel, visiting the territory. But I'd bet my badge he's scouting the situation." "What do we do?" Luke asked. "Well now, that's interesting." Garrett smiled slightly. "See, Judge Blackstone's not the only visitor we've got coming. Commissioner Hutchinson sent word. There's a territorial governor's inspection next week. Governor Campbell himself, checking on the new settlements." Mary looked up, hope stirring. "The governor outranks a federal judge in territorial matters?" "In some things, and Campbell's an interesting man. Started poor, made his own fortune in mining. He's got particular opinions about rich folks trying to buy justice." Garrett leaned forward. "If you were to present your case to him, legally married woman being harassed by her family, he might take interest." "Might isn't certainty," Luke pointed out. "No, but it's better odds than facing Blackstone alone." Garrett stood. "Think about it. Meanwhile, keep your heads down. Blackstone's got 2 clerks with him that look more like hired guns than legal assistants." After he left, Mary and Luke sat in heavy silence. Finally, she spoke. "I should go back." "No. Luke, be practical. My father won't stop. Even if we win this round, there'll be another judge, another threat. You could lose everything, your freedom, your life, because of me." He knelt before her chair, taking her hands. "You are everything. You and this baby are my whole world. I'd rather face a dozen corrupt judges than lose you. But no buts. We're not running anymore. Remember, this is our stand." She cupped his face, seeing the determination there, the love that humbled her. "All right, we fight." The next days passed intense preparation. Mary wrote her own letters, to childhood friends who might still have influence, to a sympathetic aunt who'd always disapproved of her father's methods, even to James at Harvard, praying he'd receive it. Judge Blackstone made his presence felt, touring the town with his armed clerks, asking pointed questions about the Harlans. But the townspeople had closed ranks. Shopkeepers were politely unhelpful, neighbors suddenly forgetful. Even the saloon girls claimed ignorance. Decent folks, Luke murmured, watching from their window as Blackstone's party was turned away from yet another establishment. They're protecting us, Mary marveled. We're part of the community now. That means something out here. Governor Campbell arrived on schedule, his retinue impressive but not ostentatious. He was a weathered man in his 50s who walked like someone who'd worked for everything he had. The public meeting was held in the newly finished church. Campbell listened to reports on the settlement's progress, asked sharp questions about resource allocation, showed genuine interest in the citizens' concerns. When the formal business concluded, Mary stood. "Governor Campbell, might I have a word?" Conversation stilled. Everyone knew the Harlan situation by now. Blackstone, seated in the back, leaned forward with predatory interest. "Of course, Mrs. Harlan, Mary Harlan." She moved to the front, Luke beside her, very conscious of all eyes upon them. "Sir, I need your help." Campbell's eyes sharpened, taking in her obvious breeding, her pregnancy, the protective way Luke stood near her. "Go on." Mary told her story simply, the forced engagement, the discovery of Theodore's nature, her flight and transformation. She spoke of finding love and purpose, of building a life based on choice rather than duty. When she finished, the church was silent. "My father wants me returned like property," she concluded. "He's sent judges and threats and promises of ruin. I'm asking you as territorial authority to recognize my marriage and my right to choose my own life." Blackstone stood. "Governor, I must protest. This woman is Evelyn Whitmore, fled from her legal guardians while underage. The marriage is fraudulent." "I was 23 when I left," Mary interrupted. "Well past the age of consent. Contracted under a false name." Blackstone continued. "Clearly coerced by this man who found her in distress. I chose my husband freely," Mary said firmly, "as is my right as an American citizen." Campbell raised a hand for silence. "Judge Blackstone, are you here in official capacity?" "I am investigating a potential federal matter." "On whose authority?" Blackstone hesitated. "Concerned citizens have raised questions." "That's not an answer." Campbell's voice hardened. "Are you here as a federal judge or as a private citizen?" The distinction is everything." Campbell stood. "If you're here officially, show me the paperwork. If you're here as a private citizen, then you have no more standing than anyone else in this room." The crowd murmured approval. Blackstone's face darkened. "Governor, you don't understand the powers arrayed." "I understand plenty." Campbell moved to stand before Mary and Luke. "I understand a young woman fled an intolerable situation. I understand she found honest work and honest love. I understand she and her husband are productive members of this community." He turned to address the room at large. "The territory of Wyoming has long prided itself on independence. We judge folks by their actions, not their origins. Mrs. Harlan, do you wish to remain married to your husband?" "With all my heart." "Mr. Harlan, do you claim this woman as your legal wife?" "I do, and I'll defend that claim against any man who says otherwise." Campbell nodded. "Then, as territorial governor, I recognize this marriage as legal and binding. Any attempt to dissolve it against the party's wishes will be met with the full resistance of territorial law." The church erupted in applause. Blackstone pushed his way out, his clerks following. Mary sagged against Luke, relief making her knees weak. "Thank you," she whispered to Campbell. "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "Your father won't give up easily. But you've got the territorial government's backing now. That's not nothing." The next morning brought validation of Campbell's warning. Mary was hanging laundry when she spotted riders approaching, not the usual ranch hands or settlers. but well-dressed men on expensive horses. "Luke," she called, reaching for the rifle kept by the door. He emerged from the barn, taking in the situation instantly. Inside, Mary. "I'm not hiding. Please." The urgency in his voice moved her. From the window, she watched Luke face the riders. Her heart sank as she recognized the lead figure, not her father, but worse in some ways, her brother James. "Luke Harlan?" James's voice carried clearly. "I'm James Whitmore. I believe you're married to my sister." "I am." James dismounted, and Mary could see the changes in him. Thinner, older looking than his 20 years warranted. "May I speak with her?" "That's her choice." Mary stepped onto the porch before she could lose courage. "Hello, James." "Evelyn." His face crumpled slightly. "My God, look at you. When Father said you were living like frontier trash, I'm living like a free woman," she corrected. "There's a difference. You're pregnant." "Yes, happily so." James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from childhood when he was upset. "Evie, please, just come home. We can fix this. Say you were ill, confused. Father will manage the scandal." "I don't want it managed. I want it over." She moved closer, seeing the brother she'd once adored beneath the Harvard polish. "James, I'm happy, truly happy. Can't that be enough? You've destroyed everything." The words burst out of him. Father's had 3 business partnerships dissolve. Mother takes laudanum for her nerves. "The Blackwood scandal. Did you know Theodore's wife really was murdered? They arrested him last month." Mary gasped. "What?" Her lady's maid finally talked. He'd beaten her once too often. She fell down the stairs. James's laugh was bitter. "So congratulations. Sister, you were right about him. But the scandal splashed on us too. The Whitmore name is ruined. I'm sorry you've all suffered." "Are you?" James stepped closer, and Luke tensed. "Because you seem perfectly content in your rustic paradise." "James." Mary's voice gentled. "I am sorry, but I won't apologize for saving my own life. Father would have handed me to a murderer for the sake of profit. Would you have preferred I stay? End up like Theodore's first wife?" Her brother's shoulders slumped. "No, God, no. When we heard about the arrest, Father went white as paper. Mother actually said, she said, maybe you knew somehow, that maybe you were right to run." "But Father sent you anyway." "Someone had to try." James looked at Luke properly for the first time. "You'll take care of her." "With my life." Luke said simply, "She's stubborn, always has been." "I've noticed." Something passed between the men. An understanding, perhaps. James turned back to Mary. "I have messages. From Sarah. She's well, working for the Astors now. From Aunt Catherine. She says to tell you she's proud of you." He pulled letters from his coat. "And from me." Mary took them with shaking hands. "James, I won't be Father's messenger again." Her brother straightened. "I'll tell him I found you well and determined. What he does with that." He shrugged. "I'm thinking of staying in California after graduation. The Whitmore empire can crumble without me." "Jamie." She hadn't used the childhood nickname in years. "Thank you." He kissed her cheek, whispered, "Be happy, Evie. Be free enough for both of us." Then he was mounting up, riding away with his companions. Mary stood watching until they disappeared, tears streaming down her face. "You all right?" Luke wrapped his arms around her from behind. "He chose me," she whispered. "Over Father, over everything. He chose me. Family should." Luke's hand spread protectively over her belly. "Real family. Anyway." That evening, Marshal Garrett arrived with news. "Blackstone's leaving. Got a telegram calling him back east urgently. Seems someone important's been arrested for murder. Needs representation." "Theodore," Mary breathed. "That'd be my guess. Your father's going to be busy managing that scandal. Might give you folks some breathing room." After he left, Mary and Luke sat on their porch, watching sunset paint the valley gold. The letters from Sarah and Aunt Catherine had brought tears and laughter, voices from her past accepting her present. "Think it's over?" Luke asked. This round, maybe. Mary leaned into his warmth. Father might try again, or he might decide we're not worth the effort anymore. Either way, we're ready. Luke pressed a kiss to her temple. You faced them all down. Theodore, your father's judges, even won your brother over. You're remarkable. We're remarkable, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of it without you. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the growing settlement, children playing, hammers still working in the late light, a woman calling her family to supper. Normal sounds of normal life, but precious beyond measure to two people who'd fought so hard for normalcy. No regrets? Luke asked, echoing his question from months ago. None, Mary said firmly. Then, hand on her belly. Well, maybe one. I wish your mother could meet this baby. And Jenny, she'd have been a wonderful aunt. Luke's arm tightened around her. They know. Somehow, they know. As stars appeared overhead, Mary thought about the strange journey that had brought her here, from Fifth Avenue mansion to mountain cabin to this growing town. She'd lost a fortune and found herself, lost a family and gained a better one. I love you, she told Luke, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Love you too, he replied, helping her to her feet. Come on, Mrs. Harlan, let's go home. Home. Such a simple word for such a profound gift. As they entered their little house, Mary glanced back once at the vast sky, the endless mountains, the territory that had given them sanctuary. Thank you, she whispered to the wilderness that had saved them both. Then she followed her husband inside, closing the door on the past and opening her heart to whatever future they would build together. Spring arrived in Haven Valley with a rush of wildflowers and the cry of a newborn baby. Luke paced the porch while Doc Morrison tended to Mary inside, her labor having started at dawn. The women of the settlement had gathered. Mrs. Patterson, the shopkeeper's wife, young Sarah Mills, who'd arrived last month, even crusty old Agnes Turner, who ran the boarding house. First babies take their time, Agnes assured him for the 10th time. You're Mary's strong. She'll do fine. But knowing and believing were different things. Every cry from inside twisted Luke's gut. He'd faced down outlaws and bounty hunters without flinching. But this terrified him. Then, as afternoon shadows lengthened, a different cry split the air. High, indignant, gloriously alive. Luke's knees nearly buckled. Mr. Harlan! Sarah Mills appeared at the door, beaming. You have a daughter! A daughter! Luke stumbled inside to find Mary propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. Luke, she breathed, come meet your daughter. The baby was perfect, wisps of golden hair like her mother, a stubborn chin that might have been his, eyes that would settle into their true color later but now gazed at the world with solemn curiosity. She's beautiful, he managed through a tight throat, like her mother. She needs a name. Mary traced the baby's cheek with one finger. I was thinking, Jennifer, Jenny, for short, if that's all right. Luke had to turn away, overcome. When he could speak, his voice was rough. Jenny would have loved that. Thank you. Jennifer Sarah Harlan, Mary said firmly. Sarah for the friend who helped me escape. Jenny for the sister who lives in your heart. A name with history and hope. That night, as Mary slept and Luke held his daughter, he whispered to the baby about her namesake, the girl who'd sung off-key and bossed him around and believed he'd hung the moon. He told her about courage and sacrifice and second chances, about love that transcended death and found new expression in life. Little Jenny, as the town immediately dubbed her, thrived in the mountain air. By 6 months, she was crawling determinedly around their expanded house. Luke had added 2 rooms in preparation for her arrival, by her first birthday. She was toddling after him as he worked, chattering in a language only she understood. She's going to be trouble, Mary laughed, watching Jenny attempt to climb onto Luke's patient horse Buck. Look at that determination. Wonder where she gets it, Luke said dryly, remembering a certain runaway heiress who'd shot Theodore Blackwood's hat off. Haven Valley grew around them. The railroad company announced plans for a spur line that would connect them to larger markets. New businesses opened, a proper mercantile, a small bank, even a newspaper. Luke's job evolved from simple peacekeeping to genuine law enforcement as Commissioner Hutchinson pushed for the settlement to incorporate as a proper town. Town marshal, Mary mused when the offer came. Full circle from your deputy days. Different this time, Luke said, bouncing Jenny on his knee. I've got more to protect, more to lose. Makes a man careful. Also makes him better at the job, Mary pointed out. You understand what really matters now. He accepted the position, and the town thrived under his steady hand. Disputes were settled fairly. Troublemakers redirected before they became real problems. And honest folk felt safe to build their dreams. 3 years passed in domestic peace that would have seemed impossible during their desperate flight. Jenny grew into a bright, curious child who charmed everyone she met. Mary established a proper school, teaching reading and arithmetic to a growing group of children. Their home became a gathering place. Sunday dinners with the Pattersons, evening conversations with Doc Morrison about the latest medical journals. Jenny playing with the other children while adults planned the town's future. Then, on a crisp autumn day when Jenny was 4, the past returned one final time. Mary was in the schoolhouse, teaching the older children about the Revolutionary War, when she saw the carriage through the window, not the rough wagons common to the territory, but a fine Eastern carriage with matched blacks and a liveried driver. Her heart stuttered, then steadied. Whatever came, she would face it. The carriage stopped outside. A woman emerged, older, grayer, but unmistakably Eleanor Whitmore, Mary's mother. Continue with your reading, Mary told her students calmly. I'll return shortly. She stepped outside, taking in the woman who'd raised her to be ornamental and obedient. Eleanor looked equally shocked by the changes in her daughter, the simple calico dress, the calloused hands, the strength that came from choosing your own path. Mother, Evelyn, Eleanor's voice wavered. My God, you look different. I am different. Would you like to come inside? They sat in Mary's small office attached to the schoolhouse, awkward silence stretching between them. Finally, Eleanor spoke. Your father is dead. Mary felt less than she'd expected. Sadness for what might have been, perhaps, but no grief for the man who'd tried to sell her like stock options. When? 6 months ago? A stroke. He went quickly. Eleanor twisted her black gloves. James has taken over the business. He's different from your father. Kinder. I'm glad. And she was. James deserved better than their father's cold legacy. I've come to... that is, I wanted... Eleanor stopped, started again. Theodore Blackwood was executed last year. I heard... your father knew. At the end, what Theodore was. He said perhaps you'd been right to run. The words clearly cost Eleanor greatly. I've come to ask your forgiveness. Mary sat back, stunned. Of all the things she'd expected. Mother, I should have protected you. The words rushed out. I knew the marriage felt wrong, saw your fear, but I was raised to believe duty superseded feeling, that women endured for family honor. I failed you as a mother. You did what you knew, Mary said slowly. Just as I did what I had to. Eleanor reached into her reticule, withdrawing a leather folder. Your inheritance. Your father left you an equal share with James. Despite everything, I've brought the papers. Mary stared at the fortune she'd fled to escape. I don't want it. I thought you might say that, James suggested. A trust for your children's education. No strings, no conditions, just a grandmother's hope to somehow make amends. Before Mary could respond, the door burst open. Jenny tumbled in, pigtails flying. Mama, Tommy Morrison put a frog in Sally's desk and... She stopped, eyeing the elegant stranger with curious hazel eyes. Who are you? Jenny, this is your grandmother. The words felt strange on Mary's tongue. "Mother, this is Jennifer Sarah Harlan." Eleanor's composure cracked. "She looks like you at that age, that determined chin." "She gets that from her father," Mary said, surprising herself with the warmth in her voice. "Jenny, make your curtsy." Jenny performed a creditable curtsy, though her eyes remained skeptical. "Are you the grandmother who lives far away?" "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "Very far away. Mama says you have a big house with lots of stairs. I like climbing stairs." Jenny tilted her head. "Do you want to see my pony? Papa says I ride like I was born to it." Yes, I would like that very much." That evening, Eleanor met Luke properly. He'd been wary, protective, but Eleanor's genuine remorse and careful respect for their life gradually eased the tension. "You saved her," Eleanor told him quietly while Mary put Jenny to bed. "She would have died, in body or spirit, if she'd stayed. I see that now." "She saved herself," Luke corrected. "I just gave her a place to land." Nevertheless, Eleanor rose to leave. "I'm staying at the hotel tonight, leaving tomorrow. I won't impose on the life you've built, but perhaps letters, pictures of Jenny as she grows?" Luke studied her, then nodded. Family should know each other, even at a distance. After Eleanor left, Mary found Luke on the porch, watching stars emerge over the mountains. "You all right?" he asked, pulling her close. "Yes, surprisingly so." She leaned into his warmth. "It's strange. I spent so long running from that life, hating it, but seeing her acknowledge what happened, offer amends, it heals something I didn't know still hurt." "That's what time does," Luke said. "Softens edges, changes perspectives. Your mother lost years with you, missed seeing Jenny grow. That's punishment enough." "When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between changing diapers and teaching our daughter to shoot." Mary laughed. "She's 4. Luke, no guns yet. 5 more years, then." They stood together, comfortable in their shared silence. From inside came Jenny's voice, singing the lullaby Luke had taught her, the one his mother had sung, that his sister had loved. The melody was true, unlike poor Jenny's had been, but the spirit was the same. Love carrying forward, healing finding its way. "No regrets?" Luke asked one more time. Mary turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd found her in a blizzard and helped her find herself. "How could I regret the path that brought me here, to you, to Jenny, to this life we built? Even the hard parts, the running, the fear. Especially those. They made us who we are." She smiled. "Though I could have done without Theodore shooting at you." "Fair point." Jenny appeared at the door, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mama, Papa, can I see the stars too?" Luke scooped her up, settling her between them. "See that bright one there? That's the North Star. Travelers use it to find their way home." "We don't need it," Jenny announced with 4-year-old certainty. "We're already home." Mary met Luke's eyes over their daughter's head, seeing her own joy reflected there. "Yes," she agreed. "We are." The mountains stood eternal guard around Haven Valley, keeper of secrets and sanctuary to those who needed it. In a small house on the main street, a former heiress and a redeemed lawman held their daughter and each other, rich beyond measure in all the ways that mattered. The girl who'd fled in terror was gone. The man who'd hidden in guilt had vanished. In their place stood the Harlans, Mary, Luke, and little Jenny, proof that sometimes the greatest treasures came from losing everything else first. As Jenny's eyes drooped and Luke carried her back to bed, Mary took one last look at the stars. Somewhere out there was New York, with its marble mansions and suffocating rules. Somewhere was the mountain cabin where she'd learned to be strong. Somewhere were all the paths not taken, the lives not lived. But here was home. Here was love. Here was the future she'd claimed with courage and kept with determination. "Thank you," she whispered again to the night, to the mountains, to whatever fate had driven her into that blizzard and into Luke's arms. Then she followed her family inside, closing the door on the past for good. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Jenny was already showing signs of her mother's stubborn streak, and her father's protective nature. The town was growing, changing, facing the complexities that came with progress. But tonight, peace reigned in the Harlan household. Tonight, a recovered heiress and a reborn lawman slept entwined while their daughter dreamed of ponies and stars. Tonight, love had won its long battle against fear and duty and all the forces that would have kept them apart. And in the morning, when sunlight spilled over the mountains and Jenny's laughter filled the air, they would rise to greet another day in the life they'd chosen, the life they'd fought for, the life that was entirely and eternally theirs. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Evelyn and Luke's journey from that desperate winter night to their hard-won happiness. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from listeners around the world. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and romance in the American frontier, please subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more stories of love, adventure, and redemption in the untamed territories. Share your thoughts about Mary and Luke's story. What was your favorite moment? Until next time, partners.